Live from Washington, this is Access Point, and I'm Aisha Tanzim. Hello and welcome to the show. Despite the allegations of rigging and a few undecided seats, the face of the next Pakistani government is mostly clear. Now it's time to focus on governing, and boy, is it going to be challenging. So what are the biggest challenges? How will the government deal with it, and can it deliver? Joining me in studios is Dr. Zubair Iqbal of the Middle East Institute, an accomplished economist. On Skype from Islamabad is Dr. Malia Lodhi, Pakistan's former ambassador to the US. I welcome them both to the show, but before I talk to them, let's find out what ordinary Pakistanis think about the challenges facing them. For that, let's go over to Sara Zaman.
Thank you, Aisha. So we first wanted to know what you, our commenters, think will be the most pressing challenge for Pakistan's next government. And looking at the very large volume of comments we're receiving on social media, I can tell you almost everyone is pointing to not one, but in fact, three main challenges. These are economic instability, energy crisis, and security or law and order situation. But since almost everyone has mentioned these, I want to share some uncommon remarks. On Facebook, Taimur Sultan says external loans would be the biggest challenge for the next government. And with that, rising prices and corruption will also be important. Marian Shahid thinks the most pressing challenge would be job creation. She says joblessness is leading to more poverty and crime. And Manan Baloch points to the situation in Balochistan as the biggest challenge. He says people are being kidnapped there and dead bodies are turning up quite regularly. We also received some video comments on this question. Let's take a look.
तालिबान का थ्रेट जो मिल रहे हैं, जो दहशतगर्दी है, टेररिज्म है, इसके मुतल्लिक वो फौरी तौर पर कोई लायामल बनाए।
सबसे बड़ा मसला मेरे नज़दीक जो है वो तालीम का है, एजुकेशन का है, लेकिन किसी जमात के किसी एजेंडे में वो एजुकेशन को उस लेवल पर प्रायोरिटी नहीं दी गई।
So for some, the Taliban pose the biggest challenge for the incoming government, while others think it's going to be lack of education. So to read all the comments and share your thoughts with us, just log on to facebook.com/VOA Urdu or come to my Facebook page. Username is Sara Zaman TV. Back to you, Aisha.
Thank you very much, Sara. Now that we've heard what Pakistanis think are the biggest challenges, let's also ask our guest, Dr. Zubair Iqbal, do you agree with the people? Are these the top couple of challenges facing the government, or do you think it's something else?
Oh, it's fairly correct. The problem is not that whether they're correct or not. This is universal truth. Issue is what's more important. And how do we handle this in the short term and in the long term? This election is very critical for two reasons. First of all, not that it has brought about a break from the past, but it also has given expectations that issues will be addressed. How will they be addressed will be an important issue. Now, at this moment, we've got two very basic challenges. First of all is economy isn't growing. That is very correct. And in part, this is also adding to the issue of instability as well as unemployment and therefore of political insecurity and problems at the borders because unemployment is increasing. Second issue that we have to encounter and which I think this election is implicitly brought out is the old days are gone. We have to do something else. The electorate has spoken. Electorate has crossed through all the barriers and boundaries, and therefore, what they're telling you is, we will give you 5 more years. Fix it. If you don't do it, we're going to get rid of you.
So, Dr. Malia Lodhi, a lot to be fixed. If you were given that magic wand, what are the top 3 things that you would fix first?
Well, I would agree with the victor of the election when he was asked just a few days ago what were his top 3 priorities. And I've been writing this and saying this for a long time. The top 3 priorities are the economy, and the economy. I think what we've also seen in this election is that the whole notion of performance has played a pivotal role in the way voters responded and the way they voted for who they voted for. Because the way the outgoing government or the former ruling party was punished, the People's Party, which was run by President Zardari, was voted out and routed. In fact, it received less votes than Imran Khan's Tehreek-e-Insaf. So I think what the message is of voters that we will assess you on performance and we will then vote accordingly. And I think this is a very important message for the incoming government. So I think, for them, obviously getting down and dealing with the economy is crucial. But the one piece of advice that I would give them is the following. Pakistan has been run for the last several years without a national security strategy. Unless the incoming government evolves such a strategy, because this strategy must deal with not just the threats to law and order, but to economic security. What my colleague Zubair was just mentioning, people expect jobs, people expect, a better life
People
for their
expect
children. They want
jobs and everything. Okay, so let's get back to you, Dr. Zubair Iqbal. What Dr. Malia Lodhi was saying was performance is very important. That's why PPP was rooted out. We already know the names of the next finance minister and the advisor on finance.
Yes.
Ishaq Dar's name's coming forward as the finance minister, Sartaj Aziz as the advisor on finance and foreign policy. Looking at their past performance, what do you think of these?
Well, I think it was a good decision. In the case of Pakistan, you do not appoint a technocrat as a Minister of Finance. Technocrats have typically proven to be ineffective. This is a good decision in the sense that Mr. Dar has not only the expertise, but also the experience and political savvy to be able to carry it through.
And explain to our audience why technocrats are not good finance ministers.
Because the technocrats do not bring with them any constituency. They're basically technical people. They don't have any constituency, and therefore, in order to be able to get their ideas across, they cannot bring about people or groups of people or the constituencies which will support them. That's the role of the politician. So it's important to have a politician as the Minister of Finance supported by a good technocratic team that can put forth realistic, practical, operational measures to be able to get the economy moving. So this decision with respect to Mr. Dar is not a bad decision at all. I'm not entirely sure about Sartaj Aziz. He is a very bright person. He's a very old, wise person. The point, though, is you cannot have two people running the same operation. There will always be conflicts. So it's a good idea to define a clear-cut chain of command so that the finance minister is independent of what you could call the prime minister's office in order to be able to get things done.
Okay, Dr. Malia Lodhi, what do you think of this idea? Two people who might be fighting, a turf battle might be going on?
I think what we know for sure is that Ishaq Dar will be the next finance minister of Pakistan. I think the other person whose name you mentioned, a very respected figure, there's just speculation. I have no doubt that the Prime Minister-elect Nawaz Sharif will not create a duality of command at the finance ministry. I think Ishaq Dar is a good choice, but I also think something else is very important, which is Nawaz Sharif starts off with an extraordinary advantage, which was denied to his predecessor. He does not have to deal with coalition government. He doesn't have to deal with allies, some of whom tend to be very difficult and begin to blackmail a government. He has a huge majority. In fact, the way he's cobbling together a majority, he may end up with 2/3 in Pakistan's parliament. Now, that comes with a huge responsibility also. Not only will Nawaz Sharif have the ability, certainly he has now the political means to take tough decisions. And I don't think any of Pakistan's problems can be resolved without taking tough decisions. These are decisions which may not be popular in the beginning, but these are decisions that are necessary for Pakistan to get its economy out of this mode of stagnation. And he also needs to take tough decisions on militancy and how he will respond to the militant threat to law and order.
And militancy is also connected to economy in many ways because that's what's keeping investment out of Pakistan. Dr. Zubair Iqbal, here's a question. Nawaz Sharif is saying that in the first 100 days, people will start seeing a change, start seeing a difference. Is that possible?
I think it's a very good political hyperbole. But the point is, the budget is on the way. Budget has to be approved by the end of June, which gives them barely 45, 50 days to do it. Budget is the only policy instrument that Pakistan has to be able to implement its economic policy. If that's the case, the choice will have to be made whether this budget is going to be used for political purposes or for economic revival. We will know by the time the budget is approved and out which way the government is going to go. If the government takes on the position that this budget is going to be used in order to eradicate at least the short-term problems that are holding up the economy, then I would expect, yes, they will have a space in which they'll be able to work in the medium term or perhaps the full 1 year to be able to get somewhere. But it is important The budget should be an instrument that addresses the economy and not the political exigencies.
Do you think, Dr. Malia Lodi, that the budget will do all that Dr. Zubair Iqbal is saying? Nawaz Sharif has already been briefed by Sardar Aziz and his economic team on what to do in the first 100 days and what the larger agenda should be. Do you think they're ready to do what is necessary?
I think more important than the budget is going to be the direction that the next Prime Minister sets for the country. I think the people of Pakistan have given him a handsome mandate because they hope and yearn for leadership, leadership of the kind that they have not seen in the last 5 years. I think they will have the patience because remember, every incoming government does have a honeymoon period. And in this honeymoon period, if Nawaz Sharif can show that he has seriously begun the process of solving Pakistan's problems, I think people will show patience. What people are impatient with is a do-nothing government, a government that just clings on to power and is only interested in the power and privileges that office brings. So I think if Nawaz Sharif is able to demonstrate that he is getting down to the job of governance, that he's serious about it, then I think, people will give him time because none of Pakistan's problems can be resolved in a day.
Now, people may be patient with the next government, but one thing that they're very impatient about is the energy crisis, the electricity going for hours and end. So let's go over to Sara Zaman to find out what ordinary Pakistanis told us about that crisis.
All right, since the energy crisis is affecting almost everyone in Pakistan, we asked how you think this problem can be resolved. On social media, Israr Sawati says, government will have to overcome circular debt and reduce line losses. He recommends starting wind, solar and biogas energy projects and encouraging the use of energy-saving light bulbs. Iftikhar Khan suggests purchasing energy from private sector and rental power plants in the short run and building dams in the long term. He says industries should be encouraged to produce their own energy using natural resources. And Jamshed Khan says WAPDA, the Water and Power Development Authority, should be privatized and bills should be charged at a flat rate so people can pay the same price for each unit used. He says agricultural tube wells should also be charged a flat monthly fee. Now, there are a lot more comments on Urdu VOA's Facebook page that you can check out, but let's right now take a look at some video comments.
एनर्जी का कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है हमारे मुल्क में ये जानबूझ के इसको एनर्जी क्राइसिस इस मुल्क को डिस्टेबल करने के लिए एनर्जी क्राइसिस पर्पसली पैदा किया गया है
कमी हमारे पास कोई नहीं है लेकिन गुड इंटेंशन जो है सबसे बड़ा अलमिया हमारी नेशन का वो बना हुआ है
मिसाल के तौर पे रेंटल पावर इन लोगों ने रेंट पे बड़े बड़े वो प्रोजेक्ट तो लिए खुदा के बंदे यही पैसे अगर आप अपने प्रोजेक्ट्स पे लगाते डेमो पे लगाते तो हम करते.
So as you heard, some people think the energy crisis is artificial, while others think that rental power plants are in fact a bad idea. So for the experts' take on this, let's go back to Aisha.
Thank you, Sara. Dr. Zubair Iqbal, you heard it all. Do we have an energy crisis or is it made up?
No, it is a crisis. It's a crisis for several reasons. First of all, there's a short-term problem and then there is a more serious long-term structural problem. The short-term problem clearly is that the installed capacity is not being utilized. The reason why it's not being utilized is because inputs are not available, and that largely goes back to the issue of heavy subsidies. The government implicitly and explicitly gives heavy subsidies through the budget, which then leads to the circular debt. And that circular debt, because you're not repaying it, causes the producers, private sector producers who sell electricity to the government, refusing to produce as much as is needed, even though they have the capacity to produce it. If you can get rid of this circular debt and move towards eliminating and redirecting subsidies, you can do it. And this is something that can be done in the short term. And that's the reason why what they do in the budget is going to be very important. Long-term problem is a much more serious problem. Even if you were to solve the short-term problem, you cannot fix the long-term problem, which is structural in nature, unless you make very fundamental changes. Remember, in Pakistan, the ratio between the hydroelectric and the non-hydroelectric, the thermal power, should be about 30 to 70%. At this moment, it is about 85 and 15%. You have to produce more hydroelectric power, number one. Number two, you have to introduce increased efficiencies and raise the prices to cover the cost of production so that long-term investments can take place. That requires you must have in place a very well-defined policy of a long-term nature that nobody will be able to change it. So it has to be almost like a constitutional amendment that requires that you cannot change the policy which is going to give you long-term security and protection with
Energy
respect to
independence.
energy. Yes.
Dr. Malia Lodhi, energy is very important when you're talking about economy. A lot of people say the energy crisis is affecting economy very badly. Do you agree with Dr. Zubair Iqbal? We need almost a constitutional amendment to make a long-term energy policy?
Well, again, I would say that what you need above all is political will and clarity and seriousness. So I think an amendment comes later. First, you have to show that you are serious about resolving it. And I think one of the things that we're hearing from members of who could be in the new government is that Nawaz Sharif is thinking of creating or evolving an integrated energy policy so that all the elements are in and it's a coherent policy, short term and long term, and that he might end up creating one super ministry for energy. Because remember, several sectors of energy are looked after by separate ministries. So I think if he's serious and he's thinking of a new way and a new approach to Pakistan's energy crisis without resolving, I mean, if we don't resolve the energy crisis, we're not going to get any economic revival, Aisha. You're absolutely right. So he knows how serious this is. And I think he will try very hard to show results very quickly. But the problem is going to be that there are not going to be any results that you can actually show very quickly. So long as you're able to demonstrate to people that, look, I'm getting down to it, that over time you will begin to see a difference. Because remember, he also is supported by Pakistan's business lobby.
And as you said,
Pakistan's
as you said, he has a honeymoon period to perform. Dr. Zubair Iqbal, I can't but help think of Iran-Pakistan gas pipeline. How big or small is its role in Pakistan's energy policy?
It will be quite significant. Pakistan will be able to acquire about 25 to 30% of its gas needs at the peak, which is not a bad idea to have, number one. Number two, I think the more important part is that if it's maintained on a continuous basis and is guaranteed, then you can establish your long-term energy policy dependent upon it, based on this input that will be available. That also requires that you should produce your own domestic energy sources, gas and others, which can then supplement it so that under circumstances when this gas supply becomes uncertain, you've got domestic supply available to be able to take care of it. The point that boils down to is, what does it mean with respect to Pakistan-US relations?
Exactly.
Now, that is something which is very tricky because remember, the sanctions are against the availability of gas and not on the pipeline itself.
So building the pipeline doesn't take
Yeah.
the sanctions.
No.
Let me bring Dr. Malia Lodhi in. Dr. Lodhi, we are going to talk about economy today. Foreign policy is not the topic, but still, as Dr. Zubair Iqbal said, Iran-Pakistan gas pipeline, important for Pakistan, brings in U.S. When we do a cost-benefit analysis, where does it fall? Good for Pakistan, bad for Pakistan, neutral?
I think we're putting the cart before the horse. Despite the hype about this pipeline, the reality is that money has to be raised to build the Pakistan side of the pipeline. And right now, no multilateral lender is going to give money, and Pakistan doesn't have any of its own.
What
So
about the
I
money that
think
Iran
the-
offered? Can you explain a little bit?
You have to raise money. It requires huge funding to build the Pakistan side of the pipeline. You have to lay the pipeline. It also has to go through a rather troubled area called Balochistan. So I think there are lots of issues here. I do not see this pipeline addressing Pakistan's immediate needs. It may be something for the long term, and it would be contingent, frankly, on being able to diffuse the standoff between the United States and Iran, because helping to diffuse that would enable external funding and multilateral funding for this pipeline, without which, frankly, it's not going to materialize anytime soon.
Okay, well, she makes a very good point.
Absolutely.
Pakistan can help diffuse, but she also brings us to another good point, which is you want good economy, you need security. She mentioned Balochistan. The Iran-Pakistan gas pipeline doesn't work because it comes through Balochistan. How important is security for economy?
Oh, it's always important. I mean, there's never any question about that. The point is a democratic government with broad-based support is in a better position to be able to work out these disputes and therefore ease the tensions, which then reduce the security cost. I agree with Dr. Malia Lodhi. In the near term, you don't see much coming out of the Pakistan-Iran pipeline. The point, though, is the conflict between the United States and Iran cannot go on forever. Something will have to give.
And Iran has already indicated that it's willing to talk nuclear issues.
The point is, somewhere, some sort of a deal will have to be worked out. It cannot go on for very long because either the Iranian government will snap or something else will happen. And therefore, the result will be that you will be in an uncharted water. Okay? So what's important here is, on the assumption that this problem cannot last too long, and some sort of compromise has to take place between Iran and the United States and the allies, then it's a possibility that room will open, as Dr. Lodhi said, for external financing to start flowing in, which can help the production, the development of the pipeline, along with some easing of tension in Balochistan, because compromises will have to be made.
Exactly. And if the pipeline goes through, it may be some economic...
oh, yes.
Now, a lot of our people on social media thought security was a big issue, so let's go to Sara Zaman to find out what Pakistanis think.
Right, Aisha, we wanted to know where our viewers and commenters think the biggest threat to Pakistan's national security is coming from and how it can be neutralized. So let's first look at some video comments on this, and then I'll share some social media feedback with you.
सबसे बड़ा जो चैलेंज है वो दहशतगर्दी का है। आप बैठ के मुज़ाकरात करें उनके साथ, तब ये मामलात हल हो सकते हैं।
मेरे नज़र में तो हम खुद अपने मुल्क की सलामती के लिए ख़तरा है। बाकी हम जो दूसरों पे देते हैं कि फ़लाँ आता है, हमें ये करता है, फ़लाँ आता है, ये करता है, हु इज़ ही, उसको कौन आने देता है? हम जब गंदे हैं तब वो आते हैं।
So you saw that while one commenter thinks the Taliban are a big threat and terrorism is a big threat to Pakistan's security, another one thinks that poor decisions made by Pakistanis on small and large scale are a major concern. Also on our social media, many of you are saying Pakistani politicians are the biggest threat to national security, while some are also identifying the US and India as major threats. On Facebook, Naya Pakistan says terrorism and poor law and order are the biggest threat to Pakistan. He says a free and fair judicial system can help, otherwise people commit crimes without fear of punishment. Fatima Wahid thinks religious extremism is the biggest threat to Pakistan's national security and says we need to overcome this with unity. If you want to say something on these issues or read what others are saying, join us at facebook.com/VOA Urdu, or you can leave a comment on my Facebook page. The username is Sara Zaman TV. Back to you, Aisha.
Thank you very much, Sara. Now, Dr. Malia Lodhi, one of the views expressed here by somebody in Islamabad was, people say these militant scum, where do they come from? Who are they? And why do we let them? What do you think?
Well, I think that goes into the history and the context in which militancy arose. And we don't want to get into that history because it takes us right back to the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan and the fight that America fought along with Pakistan and others. But I think the more important question is to look ahead and ask why Pakistan has not been able to evolve a national security strategy, because its main security threat is internal. And that internal threat is basically from militant violence. Now, there are different kinds of militants in Pakistan. Some are in the tribal areas, some are in Pakistan cities. They have different ethnicities, they have different capacities, and they have different goals. What I would like to see the new government do is to move away from this firefighting approach that we saw over the last several years and evolve a more coherent and clear policy so that, even if they want to enter into some kind of talks with the Pakistani Taliban, that dialogue must be predicated within the context of the constitution and the law and the acceptance by these militants of the writ of the Pakistani state. So I think we will need clarity on these issues going forward, because clearly Pakistan cannot go on like this. The kind of security meltdown that we saw prior to the election. I mean, remember the election campaign was marred by violence.
Yeah, half the parties are saying they weren't allowed to campaign at all. Exactly. Dr. Zubair Iqbal, I want to tie in security with economy, because as Dr. Malia Lodhi said, economy.
Right.
How important is it, both Pakistan's internal security and the whole external Afghanistan issue? How important is it for a good economy?
Well, you see, we can't quantify it. But, you feel it. It's there. The market is telling you. The reason why investment isn't taking place, reason because some of the areas are no-go areas, the uncertainty that it creates gives you a signal, quite clearly a signal, that unless you resolve this problem, economy is not going to recover.
And what Dr. Malia Lodhi said about the national security strategy, do you agree
Yes.
that it needs to be evolved right next to economy, and without that we cannot...
Economic issues have to be integral to the national security strategy. No question about that. Dr. Lodhi is absolutely right about these matters. What is important, though, is how did you do it and how did you go about doing it? At this moment, there is no centralized institution that is capable of doing it. I think it is important for the new government that's coming in to establish this particular kind of an institution or an agency, which then should be able to coordinate independently with every segment of the society, whichever it wants to do. It sort of reminds me of what happened in a place like Chile. Remember that in Chile, an institution was created which was completely kept independent and immune from the political influences. This is the institution that created the security policy, it created the economic policy as integral to it, and then allowed for action to take place. The government acted as a barrier between the popular feeling and this particular entity, and therefore they were able to do it. Many other countries have done it. I don't see why Pakistan cannot do it.
Dr. Malia Lodhi, do you feel that there's political will to A, create that kind of an institution, and B, more importantly, be that barrier that Dr. Zubair Iqbal describes, the barrier between popular feeling and the country's economic and security needs, and the institution that helps provide the agenda for it?
Well, again, I hope that the new government is able to see. Look, every new government has the opportunity to make a fresh start. They also have a honeymoon period. And they have a chance to really review what Pakistan did before and how to improve it or how to address weaknesses in its approach. So I think here we have a government with a handsome majority, with the political means to really press ahead, and the popular support. So really, I think for them, it would be so important to organize the government to deal with these very complex and diverse array of challenges to national security, which emanate internally and also come from external sources. And here I would say that one of the most important things that they can do is to look at the structures that may be needed. Look, Pakistan has a defense policy, it has a foreign policy, it has an economic policy, and it has responses to militant violence within the country. But it doesn't really have an overarching policy that gives strategic direction to all these efforts. And I think that is what is needed, and I hope that Prime Minister-elect will step up to the plate and try to evolve such a policy.
Okay, Dr. Zubair Iqbal, A, we need a comprehensive policy. The new government's in place, as Dr. Malia Lodhi said, has a honeymoon period. What are the pitfalls that you would advise them to avoid?
Well, first of all, I would strongly recommend that one person who should be heading this kind of an entity is Dr. Lodhi. Given her experience, given her sense of the place itself, it's very important. On the issue of the challenges that they will encounter, they are multi-level challenges. There's no question about that. One of the primary challenges that's going to come is from the constituency that has supported and created this government. There are going to be interested parties in these who will not like changes to take place or like the changes to take place over a much longer period of time. How do you address these quote-unquote laggers in your own party becomes very important. So I think what they need to do is to put a barrier between these groups and themselves, the government itself, by creating an entity, say, this entity will take care of this responsibility. We have nothing to do with it. They have to be independent given the circumstances of the economy and the society.
Well, Dr. Malia Lodhi, we only have 20 seconds. Do you have any recommendation, pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah, I think one of the things that Prime Minister-elect Nawaz Sharif will need to do is to deal with the regionalized outcome of the election result, which means that he will have to show accommodation and flexibility in dealing with the provinces that are not going to be run by his party. So that is very important for Pakistan's federal cohesion and federal unity.
Well, Dr. Malia Lodhi, if you get that post that Dr. Zubair Iqbal recommended, I hope you still keep coming to our program, but I'm afraid our time is up for today. Thanks for watching. I want to thank our guests, Dr. Malia Lodhi and Dr. Zubair Iqbal. And thank you. Check out our website, urduvoa.com, like our Facebook pages, follow us on Twitter, and do not forget to tune in again next week for another episode of Access Point.